This is Jennifer Gonzalez welcoming you to episode 20 of the Cult of Pedagogy podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about dogfooding, the practice of doing your own assignments as if you were a student in your class. I first read the term dogfooding over a year ago in Wired magazine, and since that time I've been wanting to push it out into the teaching community, but other stuff kept getting in the way. Still, it's too good to keep under wraps, so I'm getting it out there today. Before we get into it, a few bits of business. This is going to be my last episode for a little while. I'm going to take a break over the summer and return with a new season in mid-August. I have got 3 kids at home all summer, and this makes recording much more challenging, so I'm going to slowly bank up some new episodes and we'll launch a new season to coincide with the new school year. In the meantime, here are a few things you can do to stay in touch. First of all, if you've just discovered this podcast and have no idea who the heck I am, I would love for you to come over to my website, cultofpedagogy.com. It's absolutely packed with resources you can use to apply to your teaching. I have videos that demonstrate teaching strategies and ed tech tools. I have reviews of really good teaching books. I've got a series called Know Your Terms where I cover educational terminology in depth, and just tons of other articles and essays, every single one of which is designed to help you get better in your teaching. I would also urge you to follow me on social media. I post all of my new content on Facebook and Twitter, and I have been putting a lot more work lately into my Pinterest boards. I have over 40 boards for all kinds of specific teaching-related interests, so it would definitely be worth your time to go and visit those boards. You can link to any of my social media accounts by going to Cult of Pedagogy and looking for the social media buttons in the sidebar. Finally, this would be a great time to catch up on my old episodes if you haven't listened to many of them. And if you like what you're hearing, I would be thrilled if you'd go to iTunes and leave this podcast a rating and a review. This really gives the show a boost and helps others find it. Now, let's talk dogfooding. Dogfooding is a term that has been used for years among software developers, and it refers to the act of using your own product as a consumer in order to work out its glitches. This is the metaphorical equivalent of eating your own dog food. So when a new app is created, company employees will load it onto their devices and actually use it for a while to see how it operates from the user's point of view. For many companies, dogfooding is just part of their best practices. It's a natural step in product development before that product is launched for consumer use. So I would like to propose that we start using this term in teaching to make dogfooding a regular part of best practices in instructional design. Now, this is not the first time I've tried to drag things from the tech world into the teaching world. Last year, I suggested that we could grow more as educators by embracing the concept of teaching in beta. The idea of beta is just where you're basically putting out a trial version of something. Instead of waiting for something to be perfect, you're going to go ahead and try it out and continue to improve it as you go along. So the beta version of teaching would be trying a new teaching idea instead of trying to get all of your training and all of your pieces in place, just giving it a try and then planning on working it out until you get it just right. So this is another way that we can follow technology's example. By dogfooding our lessons, trying our own assignments, taking our own tests, doing our own homework, attempting to actually complete those big projects that we give, we can detect all kinds of problems that we'd never notice if we just created tasks and gave them straight to students. Okay, dogfooding your assignments has so many benefits, and I'm going to list 7 of them. The first one is that it helps you set realistic expectations. If you are anything like me, you tend to go a little too big in the idea stage of any project. So, before you hand over an assignment to your students, try doing it first to make sure that you're not asking for too much. Joanne Marks, who is an elementary science teacher in Gulfport, Mississippi, assigned her students to research the life of a famous scientist and display their findings on a cereal box. Now, after explaining the requirements and reviewing the rubric with students, she told them she would bring in an example the next day. And here's what she says about that. I took it home and started doing the project. I got halfway through and I was like, oh my gosh, this is way too much for the amount of time I have allowed. So she cut back on the requirements for the project, and she gave students a new rubric the following day. If she hadn't taken this step, Joanne would have created a mess for herself and her students. Instead, she was able to adjust the assignment right on time. The second benefit of dogfooding is that it can help you write better instructions. Suppose you have created a task that includes step-by-step directions. Now, because you came up with the idea and wrote the instructions yourself, there's a pretty good chance you missed something, some small part of a step that could create big confusion for students if you forget to include it. This would be the equivalent of failing to mention that the lid must be placed on the blender before you turn it on. Something obvious to anyone who has used a blender many times, but not so obvious to someone who hasn't. So, test your directions out by attempting to follow the steps exactly as they are written. Or ask another person to read them to you and check to make sure you're not filling in gaps with your own knowledge. If you want an even better test of the clarity of your instructions, have a small group of students run through them first before you give them to anyone else. So the third benefit to dogfooding is that it helps you troubleshoot complex activities. When you're planning a lab, a workshop, or some other kind of hands-on multi-step activity, dogfooding it will help you proactively solve problems with equipment and logistics. Karen Ginsberg, a grades 7 through 8 science teacher in Oakland, California, is spending this summer practicing a water quality unit that she'll do with her students in the fall. And here's what she says about that. I will go each week and collect data as if I was a student. It'll give me more practice and experience being a student and learning as I go. What are the pitfalls? Where are the problems likely to surface? What am I really asking students to do? Am I being realistic? So running through an activity like this can help you figure out how to move students through the various stages of the task without bottlenecking them in one particular spot. And because you'll actually be using the materials, you'll have a better sense of how to organize them for student use. So far we've talked about 3 benefits. Dogfooding can help you set realistic expectations, it can help you write better instructions, and it can help you troubleshoot complex activities. The fourth benefit is that it can help you get your timing right. One common issue for teachers in the early years of their careers is timing. It takes experience to be able to accurately predict how long a learning experience is going to take. And even veteran teachers can find themselves running out of time or finishing a lesson way faster than expected. When you dogfood an activity, you can get a much clearer sense for how long it's going to take. I wish I had done this for a lesson I did with my pre-service teachers. This is what it was. To show them different possibilities for student grouping, I gave them envelopes containing teeny tiny pieces of cardstock. They were about the size of dimes. And I wanted them to arrange these in different configurations. The idea was fine, but about 5 minutes into the lesson, I realized there were just too many pieces. Doing each part of the exercise took way too long. If I had taken some time the night before to actually run through the exercise, I would have realized this quickly and simplified it. Because I hadn't done that, I had to experience it the hard way, watching my students diligently try to do as I asked and wasting precious instructional time on something that should have just taken a few minutes to get the point across. The fifth benefit to dogfooding is that it helps you to create models. Dogfooding an assignment allows you to create a prototype of a finished product, which can work wonders for helping students understand what's expected of them. This is especially important in larger projects, when students will be spending days or weeks putting together the pieces of some final presentation or artifact, or when the product you have in mind is something students have never really seen. So if you would like students to write and perform satirical skits in which they parody some significant event in history, go ahead and create one yourself first. Not only will this help you better appreciate the scope of what you're asking students to do, it will give them a much clearer target to aim for. The sixth benefit of dogfooding is it helps you revisit the mind of a beginner. If you have done the kind of work you're asking students to do many times, it makes perfect sense to you. That means you just might have a hard time explaining it clearly to someone who is coming to it for the first time. Addressing this problem requires a slightly different kind of dogfooding, finding some way to approach your assignment the way a beginner would. This was the challenge for Sarah Brown Wessling, a high school English teacher and the 2010 National Teacher of the Year. Early in her career, she had tasked her students with doing a literary analysis of The Great Gatsby, but one student just wasn't getting it. After several one-on-one sessions with the student, including think-alouds and looking at student models, Sarah still wasn't able to make the task clear, and her student never quite got it. I had been asking her to do something that I could already do, Sarah says. I had already read The Great Gatsby. I had written papers on it. I had analyzed it. It was not hard for me. And because I couldn't struggle along with her, I couldn't help her. Determined to do a better job the following year, Sarah took a week after school let out for the summer and headed straight for the closest university library. I didn't pull out books on how to teach literary analysis, she says. Instead, I had the assignment sheet that I'd given my students, and I grabbed a book that was hard for me, a book I hadn't read. I grabbed some Proust. I sat down with 2 notebooks. In one notebook, I did the assignment that I'd given my students. In the other notebook, I wrote down everything my brain did as I did that assignment. By the end of that week, Sarah had discovered a clearer approach to tackling literary analysis with her students. So we've talked about 6 different benefits of dog fooding your assignments. Number 1, helps you set realistic expectations. Number 2, you write better instructions. 3, you can troubleshoot complex activities. Number 4, you can get your timing right. 5 is to allow you to create models. 6 is revisit the mind of a beginner. And 7, the last one, is that dog fooding allows you to tweak your design. I can't count the number of times I have gone to fill out a form as a student and just in regular life, and I didn't have enough room for something I had to write. I really wish more people would try completing their own forms. And who makes more forms than teachers? We create worksheets, tests, even online forms that may very well need some editing in their design. Attempting to complete them yourself is a simple form of dog fooding that can immediately show you when you've asked for a paragraph but only offer an inch of writing space, or when you have set your lines way too close together, or when you've provided way more space than you need for an entry, and this can make students question the quality of their response. It's just a little thing, this spacing issue, but little things can add up. Once you build this into your practice, you'll get better at spacing things right the first time around. So that's dog fooding. Now, although adding dog fooding to your planning process will take extra time, just consider the alternative. If you don't troubleshoot an assignment before giving it to students, you could be setting yourself up for hours of frustration as you attempt to reteach concepts, provide time for students to redo assignments, explain requirements to parents via phone or email, make adjustments to your schedule for activities that were timed wrong, or even deal with discipline issues that result from students just not getting what they're supposed to do. Eating your own dog food is time well spent. It's a simple way to take your practice one step closer to perfection. To read a text version of this podcast, go to cultofpedagogy.com/dogfooding. Thanks so much for listening. Have a good, relaxing, and refreshing summer, and have a fantastic day.